we've all faced situations in our lives where the cultural norms of our society, of our family, of our traditions have impacted the way that we interact with the world. And sometimes it doesn't allow us to feel free to express who we actually are inside. And so today, my guest, Jerry Fu, we have, he's here to kind of talk about what that looks like, especially in the Asian American community, for leaders in organizations that may experience a bit of friction between how they interact in their organization, their workplace, and how they've kind of grown up in their culture to interact and behave. And so it creates a very interesting kind of picture and situation for a lot of Asian American leaders. And so Jerry has a heart for them. He's also an Asian American leader himself. And so he really gets it. He gets the struggle. And so he's here today to talk to us about his heart for the community and kind of what he's all about. So I'm here today joined with Marquise Navarro and Monica Riva. We're interviewing Jerry Fu and just ready to dive right in. So Jerry, I would love for you to spend a minute to just kind of introduce yourself, your practice, and then we'll get going from there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Always good to talk with you all and to hear the questions that you would like me to answer. So yeah, a bit about my journey. With Asian culture, it was if you had conflict, you just kind of suppressed it, right? The example I'll give is, let's say let's say as a kid, I wanted to invite some friends over, and my mom was ready to put out some food and just be a good host. So then two problems come up. Number one, my friends tell their friends about my party, so now we've got double the people that my mom had prepared food for, and none of them take their shoes off when they enter the house, right? So just got all these people, cultural norms on one side, cultural norms on the other. And then, right, after, my mom sees, the food, and she's worried about not having enough. And then she's seeing all, these kids scuff up her carpet with shoes that, who have been who knows where, right? And so she puts on a brave face and, everyone's happy, everyone leaves. And then just what happens after that? Oh God, those people, they just scuff up my carpet. They're my mom's kind enough to save face in front of them because she doesn't want to act. She doesn't know how to bring up the idea of, hey, could you please take your shoes off before you enter the house, right? Like being more proactive with that. And so that approach kind of translates to conflict later in life, right? And so when I tell her, hey, I'm upset with this friend, oh no, just don't bring it up. It's just not worth it. You don't want to antagonizing them, right? And so now people are mad at me, or things, or people are upset, or whether fairly or not, right? I'm at work and my default is just to give in. Oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Like, even if I'm not the one in the wrong, right? And so kind of fast forward to when I moved back to Houston for a job. I moved to Houston and I ended up getting fired because my boss would fairly or not be upset with me. It was my fault. Like that's a whole nother rabbit trail to unpack. But point being, right, I didn't know how to handle someone who was upset with me. And it wasn't until I went through some leadership training and learned how to have conversations to help reconcile the relationship in a more proactive way, in a way that took more courage, but also more curiosity, and that helped me become more successful in trying to maintain healthy working relationships. And so that's one area of conflict that I deal with. So for Asian Americans who deal with a boss that say, hey, my boss is being temperamental and they're really upset with me, I don't know how to handle it, and I think they're being unfair, but I don't want to confront them and then find out I just get fired for it, right? So then the second area of conflict that I focus on is within their culture, as you kindly referenced earlier, right? My parents say this is what defines success for me, right? Get a career, beg away money for 20 years working for somebody else. and pray that, if I save enough aggressively, that I can retire somewhat early and enjoy some level quality of life with the money that I'm supposed to have. And somewhere along the way, get married and have kids. And don't forget to raise them too, right? And then the third is conflict within themselves. So what do they even want? Why do I even want it? Like, what is important to me? What makes these things so important to me, whether it's money or prestige or other things like that? And so, yeah. So fast forward to now, when my last pharmacy job ended, and I said, I'm tired of chasing doctors for scripts. I'm tired of fighting insurance contracts for reimbursement that say, you're not worth what you charge. So this is all we're going to give you. And I said, well, what am I really about? And I said, well, from the time that I've been facilitating leadership workshops, this started in 2012 through a pharmacy nonprofit with some friends of mine. And I said, well, I see how teaching leadership saved my career. The only reason people give me any attention as a pharmacist is that I have leadership experience. And I said, well, what if I made a career out of teaching these workshops, coaching people in the same way I wish I had been coached through difficult situations that I didn't know how to deal with. We talk about how, pigs find truffles, right? Maybe I just Amazon a book on conflict and maybe that helps me, right? But what if you had a more targeted approach with someone walking with you side by side to help point out blind spots or anticipate barriers or pushback that you may have to deal with? Someone who, has been down that road, but doesn't necessarily want to implant his ideas. Like, I have a certain way I deal with conflict, but that doesn't necessarily mean that may be right for you. But, here are some principles that have worked for me. How do you want to use them, right? And so that's the shift between coaching and consulting, right? Consulting, you ask for my advice, I give it to you and an invoice, right? Coaching, it's more, as you guys know, you all are coaches, right? It's more about, hey, where are you now? Here's my toolbox, how can these help you move forward, right? And so, yeah, basically that's my heart. That's why, COVID was a weird time for all of us, I think, but for me to, in the middle of COVID, to start a business, officially launch my LLC, get some skin in the game, and incidentally actually find a girlfriend in the middle of dating online and this craziness is, I wouldn't, if you asked me to write the script, this isn't how I would have written it, right? So yeah, that's kind of where things are.
No, that's
Wow.
awesome.
That was a very interesting overview to your kind of your perspective on what you're doing with your coaching. Do you guys have any questions, Marquise or Monica?
I don't have any questions. I just want to key in on something that you said, conversations that take courage but more curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that is one that hits home for me. So leadership is something that I actually love, right? I actually started out as an executive coach and then transitioned out of that later. So leadership is a great topic, and I love that that whole field because it's very interesting to me. And I used to teach my folks before I got out, conversations, regardless of what they are, conflict or not, they're very important to have, right? And you hit it spot on to have more curiosity in the conversation. So my folks would, example I would give on a regular basis with these two guys I used to work with, my boss and then my right-hand man, let's put it that way. I was kind of in the middle. I ended up having to be a mediator for these two because they always argued. Every time they had a discussion, it was a fight. And then I told them, I'm like, you realize you're going in expecting a fight. So if you go in with a defensive mindset, that's what you're going to put out there. And then I'm like, did you think about going in with a curious mindset, looking to learn why this person has this feeling? And they both light bulbs went on. And next, those two were like firing on all cylinders. They didn't even need me anymore. I could have just packed up my crap and left. So it's amazing. Like when I hear somebody else put it in a different verbiage, because like I love the way you put that, a conversation that takes courage, but overall more curiosity. And I'm gonna steal that from you, and I'll give you credit. Don't worry.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was love to give me credit. Just spell my name right. Yeah.
Yes, because that's a very good way of putting it.
It's with a Y, not an I.
Having curiosity. So, no, it's very interesting how you got into that the whole leadership thing. So, I would ask,
sure,
when it comes to leadership, What do you think is the hardest part about leading?
Great question. Such a coach. I think, well, at least this is from my perspective and my own experience. The first thing for me is, maybe I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. The turning point for me, the hardest thing for me was to really flip that switch. Because leadership for the longest time, I had this very fixed mindset growing up about if you're not good after 2 or 3 tries, you'll never be good at it. So just don't bother. And I saw that happen so many times in my life in various different areas, whether it's cooking or juggling or, or even other people being like, just quit. Like, you're clearly struggling. And so, I mean, leadership was the same way, especially when I worked for a chain pharmacy. I just thought, why would I be a leader? Because the extra money isn't worth the extra headaches that you're going to have to clean up. And it just sounds exhausting, and like burnout just is terrible. So no. But the turning point was when allowing that possibility to say, maybe I could be good at this. Could I be good at this? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, how can I be good at this? What would that look like? And it wasn't until it was modeled for me. There's a pharmacist named Michael Negretti who I co-facilitated with at my first workshop, and studying his blueprint ultimately was what I incorporated into my own leadership style, and that's when things started to take off. It don't get me wrong, it was at least a year or so before I finally got out my Bambi footing, right? Just but to have that persistence, once you open up that possibility, the second P is persistence. Okay, so possibility and then persistence. Okay, now we're talking, right? So yeah, great question. What would you think is the hardest thing, though, just to pass the question back?
Well, for me, honestly, it was getting over my own, like you said, the self-doubt that is in there.
Yeah.
Am I doing this for the right reasons? Is
Mm-hmm.
it my ego, or is it my
Mm-hmm.
people's care that I'm actually looking after? And it was always a fear of failing my people, right? So once I got over caring about failing, and cared more about trying and recovering, is when I felt it was a little bit easier. Never got it was never perfect. And that's another thing I had to get over. Like, perfection is not a thing when it comes to leadership. It's what works. And as long as my people were taken care of, that was when I knew, okay, I don't suck. You know what I mean? So in the constant worry about did I do the right thing, but not showing my people that I was overly scared. But you still have to be open and honest with your people. So just that was hard for me. And then even then, when I left the military, because that's where all this comes from, I still wasn't sure if I did what I was supposed to do. But I still have my folks calling me to this day asking me questions, so I must have done something right.
Excellent. Yeah.
Do y'all think that leadership comes at different degrees of ease for different people? For example, as I'm sitting here listening to y'all, I'm thinking about my experience in the military when I was in charge of running a team, and I felt very good about it. Like, I didn't feel, I felt like I could take it on and I could own it, and it was very natural for me. However, that was very different back then than it is like self-leadership. So leading myself in the day-to-day and behaving like a leader in my own household and within my own business, and stepping up and doing the things that a leader should do, that's more challenging for me. So I'm curious, like, what your perspective is on the organizational leadership versus the self-leadership that maybe an entrepreneur may have to take on.
It's good. Monica, you want to chime in before I dovetail on anything? Just want to give you some playing time here,
I totally agree with what Nicolette says. I see that all the time. I work part-time also in a corporation, and I see that it's easy to step in and take leadership and take charge when you feel that it's needed. But when you have to do things on your own as your own boss, as an entrepreneur, or leading your own self and leading your family, it's harder. So perhaps you can help us figure this out, Jerry.
Sure. I mean, my toolbox is open. So to answer your initial question, Nicolette, I'll give an example from, I remember from high school, you know, the valedictorian of my class, you know, it was just clear that he got leadership at a young age. And it was, you know, I remember just almost feeling jealous of him, just being like, how is he so confident? Like you know, you're 18. How are you so confident in being a leader? The interesting realization I had later, though, was just realizing that just because someone's more talented doesn't guarantee their success as a leader. We've seen that time and time again, right? Lots of professional athletes who, oh, they're so talented, but they don't have the grit or the discipline to stay at perfecting their craft day after day. And so, yeah, that was my turning point, was recognizing, hey, you know, will I be the best leader? Maybe, maybe not. Can I be a better leader? Yeah, all right, let me work on myself today. And to take that and to be where I am now, where people have asked me for advice on how to navigate their challenges, like to your point, Marquise, right? You know, I guess when doing something right, that people are noticing. In terms of self-leadership, honestly, there's this weird dichotomy that I notice when it comes to organizational leadership, because it's one thing when you step into a role with a company and you can tell them, okay, this is their vision, this is what needs to happen, and you conduct that because you're just kind of being the messenger. But at the same time, right, when you're at the point of the front of the ship and you're just like, I don't even know where I'm going. And the irony is that if you're not leading yourself well, you know, within your own domain, it actually becomes much harder to lead even when you're on the clock, from what I've observed. You know, I've seen too many great corporate leaders that also get divorced, and you're just like, I'm not saying that excludes them from competence, but at the same time, it's just tough when they just said no. I said no to, you know, my family too many times, and now this is broken. And so, yeah, I remember when Michael said also, he says, parenting is the ultimate test of leadership, right? You can't fire your kids. You know, you can't be like, oh, you're not performing, you're done. So yeah, I think what I would say, and thinking this out loud with you guys, is just to say, hey, self-leadership and how you handle your like your immediate domain is ultimately a gauge of how well you're going to lead, you know, later on, because your team is only going to respect you on the clock if they see that you're living your own life with integrity. And integrity is a big, big word for me. People, like Marquise mentioned, yeah, leadership, people just see that, you just light up when you hear that word. When people say integrity, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're on, they know this, so let's do that. Hopefully I answered your question.
No, it's funny because it makes me think of that phrase, the way you do one thing is the way you do anything kind of situation. Yeah. And it's always like, oh, shit, I need to step up.
Yeah.
So, curious, organizationally, like you said that you have some Asian Americans that come to you. What is like their number one struggle? What is the thing that you see time and time again that this community really suffers with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the specific examples I can think of, one is, I talked to a radiologist that I know, and he mentioned how the technicians that worked under him would give him subpar work or something like that. And so he just says, well, I don't want to go to the trouble of confronting and possibly antagonizing them. It's just easier to fix this myself. And, you know, I want to ask him, well, how long do you want to keep this up, right? Like, how long are you okay with doing the work that they're supposed to be doing? And then how do you feel about basically enabling them because they don't realize that they're doing subpar work unless you tell them, right? What will it take for you to actually model the work that you like to see from them so that you can actually focus on putting out bigger fires instead of these small ones that they can be taken care of. So that's the first example I would give. The second example is from my first client, and he talked about, hey, I'm scared for my job and I don't know how to talk to my boss about a role that would really fit me better, or how to really make sure I stay proactive in staying employed. How do I do this? You know, in a way that doesn't upstage him, in a way that shows, hey, I'm actually working with him. So that's the second one. He also had a situation where he would get other job offers, and he's, you know, he had a struggle with finding a job that he liked, but is in a city that had no social life for people his age, or he struggled to find, you know, a community of people, like-minded people. And then, you know, when another city or a job in another city came up that had more options for him socially, but wasn't really on track with his career path, he goes, what do I do? Right. So how do I make, what choice do I make, right? And so we talked through, hey, it's not about the right choice, it's about having a good decision process in place. And so I would just ask him, well, I mean, what's most important to you? And having to choose between good and bad is easy. Having to choose between good and great is not so, right? So that was something else to really help him navigate through. And I definitely was over the point of being like, no, you should take this job or you should take that job. I've learned, we've all learned as coaches, hey, that's that's few people, you can say that, but and then the third example is, a graphic designer who was working at a studio, and her boss basically lit into her for not answering her phone off the clock, even though he was very unclear about his expectations from her to begin with. And how do you deal with this without getting fired, right? Even if the boss is in the wrong. So those are some of the bigger situations that I've coached people through in terms of, hey, how do I navigate this?
So would you consider Asian Americans as harder workers as other Americans? Would you consider them, what's the difference?
Yeah, great question. So work ethic is no question. I see how hard my parents work. I see how hard my clients work. I see how hard other healthcare professionals who are Asian work. They are absolutely, like, that is just one of the pillars of our ethnicity. I would say there is no question just how hard they work.
And are they allowed to speak up?
The question is not whether or not they're allowed to speak up in their cultures or in their companies. The question is whether or not they know how to speak up in a way that's productive and actually leads to productive conversation, right? So I'll give an example. Let's say I was on rotation in school. Actually, this is a good example. At one point, I was doing rounds for one of my pharmacy school rotations, and then at one point, a doctor had mentioned something about a patient that my preceptor wanted me to follow up on. He says, hey, you need to follow up on this because the doctor needs to know some more information. We have a discussion about the appropriate dose for this patient on this drug because there's complications with interactions and things like that. We need to be sure that he's aware of this. And I was just so scared of what the doctor might say to me and be like, I'm the doctor. Like, why would you question me? Or like, why are you even bringing this up? I'm busy, right? And I just had all these fearful situations in my head that I was afraid I was going to get in trouble, that I just said, nah, I'm just going to keep this to myself. And my preceptor was naturally upset with me because he just said, no, I don't understand why you're not more proactive in terms of trying to, discuss these with doctors. Was he right to give me a lower grade? Technically, yes. Was there a cultural story that he should have considered and why I was just being passive instead of just being, oh, he's just scared? Maybe there's a culture component he didn't consider. And it's nothing against him because maybe he didn't consider it. But what if he did? What if he was able to coach me through that and say, hey, are there any cultural barriers that are keeping you from doing what I'm asking you to do? Right? What are you afraid of? Right? And then, hey, this is what I need you to do. This is why you need to do it. And this is how we can overcome like these mental barriers that you're dealing with, so that number one, you actually take care of this patient well. And number two, I can give you a good grade because you're doing what I'm asking you to do and following through the way you should be doing as a pharmacist if you want to be proactive in taking care of this patient, right? things like that.
Jerry, we live in a country that's a hodgepodge. I mean, they call
Oh,
it the melting pot for a reason, you know? And
Yeah.
so I find that interesting that you brought up this instructor not even inquiring about your culture.
Mhm.
And so is that something that you think there should be more education about, like just in general, is the way our cultures may interact with each other? Because I certainly, you know, unless like when I went to Korea, for example, we had to do some like what was it called, Marquise? They give you like these videos that you have to watch so that you don't have culture shock.
Yeah, I forgot what they call it too, because they call it something different in the Air Force. But basically, so you don't go out there and embarrass yourself in your country and disrespect the locals, populace. Because I had to do it when I went to Italy and then Iraq and all that
Right.
stuff.
Right. So they give you like these orientation videos to another country kind of thing. And so that's a way to educate the people, like Marquise said, going into a new culture. But here we have cultures coming from all over, and we have to engage in the workplace, engage in our day-to-day lives. And that's an interesting thought that the instructor didn't have, right? Didn't even think about a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So what's your position on that? Do you feel like that should be like education as a normal component of school, like how we can engage with each other culturally, or how do you navigate that?
That's a great question. I'll lead off with this question. How do you feel if someone just gave you a giant textbook and says, hey, this is what you need to become culturally aware. Read it and get back to me within a week. And you're like, right? No one's
But I
excited
have
about
babies.
Right? Yeah, no one's excited about homework.
Excuse for
I mean, we
everything.
got all sorts of stuff. And yeah, I thought of this. So I'll give you an example that came to mind recently. So I had a discussion with a pharmacist friend of mine during the George Floyd attacks, and he basically showed his biases came to light very quickly, where it was like, these people are just entitled. I don't see what the problem is with guns. We wouldn't have shot them unless we had a good reason to, and everything else like that. And so, me and my love for books, I said, hey, you should listen to Brian Stevenson's book called Just Mercy, where he talks about all the injustices in the Alabama crime system and everything that he helped navigate in order to help stem the tide of the systematic killing of Black people in the Alabama justice system, right? Did he take me up on that? He hasn't yet, and that's nothing to hate on him for. It's just when you have this feeling of coercion is what I think I'm getting at, is when you feel like, oh, I have to learn this. No, that's just not going to work. But I am listening to a book now called The Hate You Give, which is this fictional account of a girl whose best friend was shot by a cop, and, while they were pulled over, and you get to see the perspectives that she goes through. And so now I'm not recommending this book to him or to anybody else to say, hey, like, you need to do this because you need more cultural awareness. But I can offer that, since I'm not pointing at anyone to say, hey, you are in the wrong, or you need education and you need to be woke and you need to learn this, right? As opposed to, hey, here's a story. What do you think of it? How does it make you feel, right? Coming back to that curiosity piece, just to say, hey, you have all sorts of people here. We have Muslims, we got Pakistani, we got Hispanics, we got, Africans, we got, Europeans, we have all sorts of gradients of Asians, right? How do we, just look around you, how would you just ask them, make them bring up the knowledge gap first, right? Just ask them, hey, what would make you curious to learn about all these other cultures, right? I always like to start off with really delicious food from all these other cultures, right? Because no one wants to turn down delicious food. And they're just like, hey, this is great. Where's this come from, right? And then that's usually the gentlest way to bring up other cultures. Just say, hey, try their food for a second. It's like, hey, this is delicious. Where does it come from? How do you make it, right? So anyway, those are some ideas.
I do love good food.
Yeah.
I think in today's age, I think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. When it comes to culture, especially in the US, because across the spectrum of cultures, you have different beliefs and upbringings. Now, in the Asian American community, it's a little bit different than in most. that I've noticed. I've noticed that the Asian American community actually has closer ties to their actual ancestral Asian culture than any other, um, like maybe third, fourth born U.S. citizen in the U.S. Like for instance, blacks in America, our culture is what? Not necessarily African culture. It's we were brought here slaves, but then you have a person like myself. I'm half black, half Mexican.
Mm.
I don't identify with the black half of my family. Never met them.
Mhm.
So my culture is actually the Hispanic part of my life. And
Mhm.
for someone to assume that I'm going to automatically identify because I'm darker than most Mexicans, you know what I mean? So I think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think a good conversation would be, um, what would you rather be viewed as, your culture or an American? And then, you know what? This guy identifies as, or he's actually very keen and very in tune with his culture. Now I know for future. You know what I mean? So I think the instructor that did, you know, or who gave you a bad grade, um,
Mhm.
I don't, I would have to say he probably wanted to make sure he wasn't assuming um, you were, you know, because what happens? You end up getting saying, "Well, don't stereotype me
Mhm.
because I'm Asian and
Damned if you
X."
do, damned if you don't.
Damned
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
do,
it's
Yeah.
that
damned if
catch
you don't.
22. We love them so
Yeah,
much.
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
so
Great point.
but
Mhm.
because you everything you said so far, yes, Asian Americans are the top of the damn food chain when it comes to education,
Mhm.
jobs, work ethic, the whole nine.
Mhm.
That's something that can't be denied. Now, I will
Mhm.
ask you this: do you find it that the further removed they are culturally from, like, let's say fifth, sixth generation U.S. citizen,
Mhm.
American born,
Mhm.
would you say it's lessened, like their work ethic or their uh, you know, culturally ingrained in the U.S. like completely? Does it change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's this great saying in Chinese. It basically translates to fortune doesn't last beyond 3 generations. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but yeah, the idea is that, you know, the first generation, they came over here, they hustled, you know, they're working menial jobs because they don't have connections to, you know, do what they would normally do, right? And so they work hard to build a house and, you know, get everything taken care so they can take care of their kids, right? Then the second generation kind of is able to watch their parents work as hard as they do, and they have an idea of how to maintain this wealth that their parents have built up. And then the third generation, basically, you can expect them to fall away because everything they have is inherited. And when anything you have is inherited, unless you know why you inherited it and that you're grateful for it and want to be a faithful steward of it, you're probably just going to waste it. And
Right.
so, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make a catalyst just for seeing that work ethic almost die off, like I'll give a quick example of, you know, I knew a missionary couple, Caucasian couple that served in China for like over 18 years, and they have a daughter, but they also adopted a Chinese girl from an orphanage in order to rescue her from, you know, Chinese orphanage life. But the irony is that it feels like in my interactions with her, she's in her living in the US, she just seems more entitled and ungrateful for everything that she was rescued from. And it's just like, I don't understand why you rescued her from this life only for her to just feel, just to spare her, only for her to feel like she doesn't owe anyone anything or to even make a life for herself. And so, yeah, you get this sense of entitlement that is very, very prevalent. And it's not for me to judge. It is for me to ask, though, where did this come from?
Right.
How is it staying around? And how do we have productive discussions over its effects and possibly to get rid of it if it's not productive?
No, that's a good point. I'll tell you what, my own son, like, you know, I've got this thing where if you want it, you get it, you work for it. If you don't earn it, it's not yours. And for my son, let's put it this way, things come to him very easily. He's a smart kid. I think I grabbed the wrong kid when we left the hospital. Like,
You upgraded accidentally.
yeah, I'm like, oh, he's cute. Let's grab that one. Um, but he's very smart. You know, he's been, let's put it this way, first grade, he finished first, second, and half of third grade in 1 year
Mm.
because he was on his own pace, and he, boom, and straight A's across the board. And
Wow.
then now he's in all advanced classes. He's like, all my classmates are huge and blah blah blah. I'm like, Bubba, you're seventh grade working in eighth and ninth grade classes. He's like, oh, sometimes he says stupid shit. But anyway, so
They're kids.
yeah, so like if it doesn't come to him naturally or easily, he gets frustrated and wants to give up, or he expects things to just happen because everything comes easy to him. So the whole entitlement piece, I'm trying to teach him, like, if it's not going to be easy, if you're not willing to work for it, you're not going to get better at it. And he picks and chooses certain things where he's like, yeah, I'm going to practice and practice. Other things he's like, no, this should be easy. Math is one of them because he thinks he is smart, but he thinks he's so smart that he shouldn't struggle with basic algebra. First off, if you put words or letters and numbers in front of me, I'm gonna be like, I don't speak German. Go ask something else. But he looks at it and he's like, all right, he's told how to do it and he's killing it, right? But as soon as he gets a problem that he can't figure out quickly, he wants to fight himself, So I guess entitlement comes different ways, right? But I think one, I can try to teach him the best I can, even though I don't know anything about math. But it's a generational thing, right? I didn't have it as good as I have it myself now, right? When I was a kid, my parents weren't rich. We're not rich, don't get me wrong. But my kids definitely have more than I did. So it's kind of my own fault. But at one point you're like, do I make them struggle just cause? Or, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a internal fight with yourself, and it's our own problem, our own fault that our kids are entitled. So I would have to say that we have a lot of work to do, and you are correct. Generationally, it's going to get worse, I think. So
we do have a lot of work. So, while y'all are talking, it makes me think about some of the basic principles that we should raise our children to have, but also that we should exhibit towards each other as mature adults. One being grace and compassion for ourselves, like internally, as well as other people around us, because we simply don't know somebody else's story. End of story, period. We just don't know. And I think it's the truth on all levels that having that grace and compassion for yourself and others could make this world transform overnight if people actually applied that. But we could get off on that tangent and talk about that for quite a while.
Episode 2, bring me back.
There you go. Well, Jerry, so what is your biggest heart as far as like serving the Asian American community? What do you want for them the most?
Yeah, great question. I guess I don't want to take from my usual talk track, but I think it illustrates what I really want for them. The 3 C's are clarity, confidence, and closure. The first C is clarity. I need to know what I need to do next, right? I just want to have an idea of how to take my next steps and what they need to be. The second is confidence. Can I do this? Do I feel good about what I need to do next and the fact that I can make something happen? Even if other people disagree with what those steps are, really. That's the biggest thing with that. And then the third is closure. Just to say, oh, I'm so happy I am past this challenge. I'm so happy that I am, I don't have this underlying resentment just sitting on my chest and me just beating myself up because I didn't have the courage to say something in that moment. Whether it's dealing with a roommate whose habits are entirely sloppy, and I've had several of those, or an underperforming technician, and that's been a weird experience hearing the same things that they tell me when I was fired. It's like, hey, I've been there, I have empathy, and it's still not going to help your job situation, right? And then the third, the third example for me was when I had to evict a roommate as well. You know, he defaulted on his lease, but he basically dared me to you know, tell him to leave. And it's just like, okay, I have to do this because everyone else is tired of me complaining about it. So let me power through it and, you know, and get this done and rip this Band-Aid off and just realize, oh, the comfort that I feel now just because I don't want to go through with it isn't worth, is worse than the closure that comes from, hey, I'm on the other side now and I can exhale and move on to the next thing. So yeah, I want those three things for them. And I hope they're, you know, whether they find it through me or another coach, I mean, I'm not going to be picky about that, but I hope I've done enough to, I continue to earn their trust in saying, hey, you know what, maybe Jerry's onto something.
I will say this, that what you're saying to me says that you have a lot of room for growth in your business, the potential, like because it clarity, confidence, and closure applies across leadership, period. So I think one day, like you could make this into something huge. I know right now you're focused on Asian Americans, but I think your vision applies to a lot of leaders who are confused and unsure about themselves. So yeah, I look forward to seeing where you go with this. Because I tell you what, we have a lot of the same views when it comes to leadership.
Okay.
And yeah, I want to see where this goes.
Yeah, appreciate it. No,
I'm gonna kind of stalk you online a little bit and see.
No, please do. I need my website needs traffic. Absolutely. You know, I paid enough for it, so let me point people to it. On that note, Marquise, one thing interesting that I heard that I really love, and I want to be able to share it when it comes to saying, oh, well, he's an Asian, he's only coaching Asian Americans like that. And the funny thing is, with niching, people are like, oh, I don't want to niche. That just narrows the focus, but it actually expands it. The irony with that, right? Because as soon as people say, hey, those problems resonate with me, I know I'm not like your ideal client, but I think you could really help me with those problems. Do you want to work with me? Right. So I'm not being like, oh, you're not yellow. Bye. I'm not like this at all. I'm not like this last name doesn't look Asian. It's not a Chen or a Fu or a, you know, or a Mac. It's like, nope, you know, I'm not like that at all. So yeah, Marquise, I mean, I'd love to continue the conversation off the recording if you're interested in just like anything, because I'd love to hear more of your story too and what you're navigating and yeah, how we can possibly have a win-win situation on our hands. Absolutely.
Definitely. Sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, are you running any workshops right now, Jerry? Anything virtual or anything physical?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. I mean, the main simple thing that I'm doing right now is I do a monthly book discussion called Coaching by the Book. And so that's the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Central. And there's some time for networking. I walk through a leadership book that I find very useful. And then for about 30 minutes, we'll go through facilitated discussion with all the participants. And yeah, it's only $10 a person. It's clearly, you know, just a low end just offer, just because I love talking about leadership literature anyway. And that's a big part of my website, actually, is I have a book blog where I summarize books that I've been reading and then some application points or some insights. And so that's the ongoing thing that I'm doing. And then everything else that I do would be more on request to say, hey, yeah, you know, our group needs you for like half a day. Can you work us through topics? And yeah, other than that, yeah, I don't have a lot going on in terms of just offerings that are out there for right now, but I am experimenting with other different webinars, assuming people are interested in more topics. So open to opportunities that you guys might be aware of that may fit my skill set.
Okay, well, definitely send us the appropriate link so we can put that in our show notes.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and then you said, oh, you have a website. What's your website? Where can we send traffic to?
Yeah, it's called adaptingleaders.com.
Adaptingleaders.com. Okay, I'll get that down too.
Sure.
Is there anywhere else that you'd like to, you know, people to find you? Are you a grammer? Are you a Facebooker? LinkedIn?
I'm focused on LinkedIn
place?
right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm focused on LinkedIn right now. Feel free to to find me on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
yeah, well, we'll see if I decide to expand to another platform or not. For right now, I'm content to work with LinkedIn for now. And yeah, hopefully I can scale up in this couple months if I can figure out my social media machine robot that can outsource things to. As you all know, that's where we find our footing as entrepreneurs, right? Where this is where I'm still finding my footing. But yeah, just happy to get people on the phone and hear their challenges and how we can better serve them and give them what they need to reach their destinations. Absolutely.
Love it. Marquise, Monica, do you have any last closing statements or questions?
I was going to say, I really enjoyed the conversation, and we may have to have you back on later on at some point and see how things are going and discuss some actual, leadership topics. I think that'd be a good time.
That would be great.
And I happen to know a bunch of people that could probably use your expertise, so I will funnel them your way.
Hey, referrals are the best compliment, I think, with that. Yeah, Monica, any other thoughts?
No, it's and this is something that is not just for Asian Americans. I can see I would even have different problems going to another country and living in another country and adapting into any kind of leadership. Somebody under me or over me, I mean, any kind of situation. So it seems to be, I mean, this is something that is really huge, I think, too. So
okay,
looking forward to seeing more of you.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, like I said, just happy to serve and help you guys, give you good copy and content for your platform as well. And so, of course, me being the coach, I just want to ask you, all three of you, what was your biggest takeaway from our time together?
Colette, you go first.
For me, I think it's been insightful to kind of hear your perspective about the struggles of the Asian American community. You always you see things from outside looking in, and it actually is not too far off. Like my understanding has been that community does tend to be more reserved. Honor is so important, and where does the line go? Where is the line drawn as to like how do you exhibit honor in a culture that doesn't understand it the same way as you do? And so just hearing your examples of some of the struggles that your clients have faced makes me feel relatable to them, because I too have had a lot of maybe not my cultural, just my character, just being kind of a more reserved person growing up. I can still feel that struggle, even though it may not be apples to apples. So that was my biggest takeaway, is just very insightful to hear from you those like relational struggles and the kind of dealing with hierarchy and your roles and how to do that whenever you're a little bit more reserved and so respectful.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So my biggest takeaway is doesn't matter your background or anything, leadership is leadership and the principles are the same. And everybody struggles with it to get to a decent level. And I don't want to say a great level because that takes years to get to a great level. And despite our cultural differences, we have the same principles of, how can I put it? It takes time and constant growth in order to lead effectively. So that was, I could appreciate that because again, I love the topic of leadership, and it's always good to hear from someone else that honestly has a completely different background than me. So it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you need non-judgmental attitude to anyone. That is what I took away from this, that we all need to learn how to not be judgmental towards others in any situation, and understand that there are cultures, reasons why somebody behaves in one way or another, not just Asian Americans, but even from one family to another, anybody.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, Jerry. Thank you so much. Like Marquis said, we will have to have you on again at another time. And so we just thank you, and we'll definitely have your information in the show notes. So for today, that's a wrap. And thank you guys for joining us. If you want to get in touch with us, you can always email us if you want. If you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to share with us, you can always write us at thisiscoachingshow@gmail.com. We're here for you. We're happy to serve you. And if you want to get coached, you could always write to us anonymously or volunteer to come on. So either way, we're here to serve you, and we just want you to experience coaching from all angles. So it's just an honor to be able to bring this content to you today. Until next time.
Thanks for the spot,
Bye.
Nicolette. Have a good day.